Hello and welcome to this conversation on workplace mental well-being, brought to you by Mana Wellness. For today's session, I'm so happy to have with us Colonel Ramesh Menon. It is my pleasure to introduce Colonel Ramesh Menon, Director at GAR Corporation. Colonel Ramesh Menon is a mental health advocate and a champion of holistic well-being with over 2 decades of experience as a defense service officer first and then a decade of work in the corporate sector. And I personally found him to be deeply passionate about the subject of mental well-being, particularly workplace mental well-being. So his rich experience, Colonel Ramesh brings in a unique perspective to the conversation on mental health and workplace mental well-being. So Colonel, thank you so much for joining us today, and it's always a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Manoj, and thank you, Mana Wellness, for giving this opportunity. I do remember that I've had a couple of earlier sessions also with you, and
Yes.
it's always good to engage with a wellness partner who really believes in having a very meaningful relationship. And I can personally tell you that I am really benefiting a lot from this engagement.
Likewise, Colonel, and looking forward to this conversation too.
Yes.
Um, to the participants, you're welcome and welcome to this conversation. If you have a question for Colonel Ramesh, please do drop them on the chat that you will see on the right side. So, Colonel, without much ado, let's just get into the questions that we have for you for this conversation.
Sure.
And Colonel, so when we speak on the subject of employee mental well-being, particularly, I have found that the fundamental challenge of an organization is to make their employees feel safe in opening up and holding conversations with. So could you give us some insights on how GAR Corporation ensures that all employees, regardless of their position, feel secure to express themselves during tough times as well?
Yeah, so this I think a lot depends on the type of leadership. And personally, I think that in any organization, it always starts from the top. What is the sort of a culture that you're creating in your organization? So as a leader, until and unless the leader himself is open and frank, encourages a culture where anybody who is standing up and questioning is appreciated instead of being bullied or made to keep silent. I can give you a very brief personal example. When I started my journey in the corporate career, I was working in a very large IT MNC. And during my very first meeting, I found one of my employees to be the sort of a person who used to always question. Okay, he was a person, anything which I used to try to talk, he used to be against it. So in the beginning, it was a little bit unsettling, but then I was very patient with him and I started listening to him. And I tried to engage in a meaningful dialogue with him where I patiently tried to make him understand my point of view. Sometimes it happened, most of the times I managed to convince him, but there were occasions where I felt that he was right and I had no hesitance in appreciating his viewpoint and telling in front of the team that he was right. And during the first promotion cycle, he was the person who was promoted from my team. So the rest of the team in the next meeting, they said, "Sir, we never thought that this person, you would promote this person because he was the person who used to always challenge you." I said, I enjoy that challenge because until and unless you have an open culture where you appreciate people who talk, because I think that as a leader, you have to take every feedback from your employee and ultimately everybody means good for the organization. So that is the
Right.
kind of a culture I'm, trying to inculcate here also, where every employee's inputs are taken very seriously. And we have this open dialogue, meet the team frequently. A leader should always make, open meetings should be encouraged, where people should be allowed to talk. But leaders should talk less and listen more. I think that's the kind of a culture we need to promote.
Colonel, thank you so much for that answer. And you just hit the nail right in the sense that this whole role of leaders there. And at the end of the day, when we look at employee mental well-being, the fundamental objective is to bring in that mindset shift and make people feel safe. And while it is important for leaders to really bring in that open culture, another challenge that we have seen is employees are not particularly ready to open up to speak about their vulnerabilities. And there again, leaders we have seen really play a key critical role in helping people to understand that it is okay. It's okay to be able to speak about your vulnerabilities and all. And that's another aspect that I would certainly like to catch your valued inputs there, Colonel. As a leader, how do you model vulnerability and self-expression of your team members?
See, the most important thing for a leader is to feel the pulse of the team. So if you don't have the pulse of your team, then you fail as a leader. Quite often, the inputs come to you quite late when you're not in a position to take any meaningful action. So, one thing is a leader should not be very hierarchical in his mindset. He
Hmm.
should have that dialogue with everybody. I always tell my team, talk to the junior most person. When you enter an office, speak to the security guard because he
Hmm.
is the sentinel there and he is your greatest brand ambassador in your office. So talk to him and try to find out what he has. He might have an input which will be very valuable for you from the way you improve your customer satisfaction.
Yes.
Similarly, janitorial staff member, that person is also equally important for you. So how do you create that kind of a culture where people are encouraged to speak? People are not, it is not that if somebody has spoken to me, it should not happen that they have bypassed a line or done something of that sort. So creating that openness and that culture of open dialogue is very, very essential. And I think it all trickles down to the leader again. If I inculcate that culture, then my second line and third line will also do the same. And that is what I truly believe, that leaders should themselves set clear examples so that the rest of the team follows. You see, I've always seen that there is this mirroring effect of a leader. A good leader, you'll always find that his reports, direct reports, and people like that would try to mirror him. If I am good, my team will be good. If I am bad as a leader, and that thing can continue trickle down the chain. If
Hmm.
I am a temperamental person and I lose my temper at the drop of a hat, the team would also continue to do that. And that ultimately, the junior most levels are the people who are going to be the victims of that kind of an attitude. So, that attitude of having a positive culture has to be created by the leader himself.
Thank you so much, Kandil. And you again pointed out through your examples an extremely crucial aspect of employee mental well-being, which is that of inclusion. Through
Yes.
your examples of security guard and janitor and other roles, this whole culture of inclusion. And when we try to bring that, one of the challenges there is about the biases we carry, collective biases that we carry about not just mental health, but attitude towards those who may be emotionally vulnerable also. So, as a leader, again, how can we make sure that we hold the mirror for the employees to look at what their biases are and course correct that?
Yeah. So see, the point is that how feedbacks happen in an organization. So until and unless you know what the employee feels and what are his biases, you will not be able to help him overcome that. So the most important thing is your channels of communication. So I think the most important thing in an organization is to have free flow of communication channels. And that has to be encouraged by the leader, where the leader knows. You see, quite often the employees don't have the full information about why. It is not only essential for a leader to tell the employee as to what needs to be done, they also need to know why it needs to be done. Quite often we fail as leaders. There are leaders who say that you just do it, that's all, don't question me, don't ask as to why it needs to be done. I think everybody needs to know, and I feel there again it's a question of goal alignment. And why people carry biases is because they don't feel included in the decision making. See, I remember in LinkedIn, I had written an article about motivation in which I had taken Zig Ziglar's example. Now, Zig Ziglar, if you see, has told two things about motivation. First is that nobody can motivate anybody. And the second he has said is that people are self motivated. So I myself, I put these two things together. The first thing for me was, as a leader, if nobody can motivate anybody, then what is my role as a leader? And the second thing is, if people are self motivated, then there is no need for anybody to motivate it. But
Right.
then the way we think about motivation is that motivation is the ability of a leader to make the team what do what he wants them to do. The way I define motivation is not about making the team do what you want them to do, because until and unless they want it, the way Zig Ziglar has told, until and unless they want it, they will not do it. For that, all their biases have to be removed. They need to feel included. And my definition of motivation is not what you want them to do, it is they wanting what you want.
Hmm.
You see, there's a lot of difference between they willingly doing it and unwillingly doing it. So, how can you remove all those biases? That is only through open, clear, transparent communication. Everybody feels included in the decision making process. So, we have got those stakeholder engagements and meetings like that we do as part of our. So we have got consultative meetings. We include even our vendors in the decision making process, because ultimately they are also equal contributors. So if you have a close kind of an approach to all these things, you will never understand what people are feeling. For a leader to get into the mind of the people is the most important thing. And that is the key to success.
Great. There's some very, very valuable insights to the Colonel. And this whole aspect of you saying that enable employees want what you want them to have that
Absolutely,
requirement.
absolutely. I've written a whole article on LinkedIn about this because I felt that in my understanding, because I've got more than 4 decades of managerial experience today. So during this 40 years that I have been at the workplace, I have realized only one thing: people will continue to do what they want to do. Now, making them want what you want is the key to success. Ultimately, they should feel so aligned to you. So it's a question of goal congruence between the leader and the team. Until and unless those goals are aligned, you can never go on the path of success.
Right, Colonel. Colonel, this brings me to another question, actually, again connected to this whole leadership element, that many a time, particularly around employee mental well-being, the communication is that to the employee,
Yeah.
communication that we have something for you, we want you to do something, and this whole walk the talk concept that we keep talking, the leaders should do that, particularly from a mental health perspective, mental wellness perspective, when we are asking them to remove their biases and practice mental well-being, make it very inclusive and supportive. How do we get the leaders to walk the talk? And then they say that, okay, I have been walking the talk, I have experienced this, I'm going to communicate about my experiences and all.
Yeah, that's what See, ultimately, that's what every time I repeat to the point of being repetitive, that the leader has to create those and set those examples for the team to emulate. So, if you are not walking the talk, do you expect the team to have a certain type of behavior? As a leader, you don't follow that practice, but then you say that you have to do it because
Hmm.
I am telling you to do it. It doesn't work that way. You have to create that example. I come from a an infantry officer background where I was in combat and leading from the front. So
Hmm.
we in the armed forces, the army officer, especially a young officer, is always trained that he has to lead from the front. He has to be willing to take the bullet first. Until and unless he does that, why should the team follow him? So, so that is the approach that I have even today got, where I feel that if I don't lead from the front, the team will never be there to follow. So you have to, as a leader, be able to do the right things. If you don't do the right things, the team doesn't respect you. The team doesn't follow what. It's just by you telling in today's environment, your own kids don't listen to you. They also question you. They also have a mind of their own. So how do you expect your team to have that kind of a respect and follow you blindly? So you have to be able to stand up to the harshest scrutiny of your team. Set those personal examples in standards, in your ethics, in your way you treat the people below you. You have to set all those right examples for the team to emulate.
Thank you, Colonel. So, Colonel, this brings to the next point again around leadership element, which is about caring. One
Yeah.
element is about caring also, and so how can the leaders really, especially in the concept of employee mental well-being, give that feel of support for the employees, that we are there for you and we have created a supportive environment for you, and how do they communicate that?
Yeah. So see, and that the duty of care part of it is very, very important. The leader needs to make the team feel that they are being included in it. So inclusion, we spoke about inclusion. First step is inclusion. So they have to be included and they have to feel a sense of belonging. Now you see, I am, a person who handles employee experience in my organization. My client experience I handle in my organization. So in that kind of a job, I always believe that how do you keep your people engaged? Engagement. And engagement, if you really see, is a byproduct of experience. If you employee has got a good experience, he will remain engaged with the organization. So that is the reason why you need to focus on each and every experience that your employee is having in the workplace. He should feel good about himself. He should have good experiences. He should feel that he is cared for, he is included in all the decision making, and all his needs also. As a leader, you need to understand. That's why today there is so much of talk about diversity, inclusion, all those kind of things that are there. They are becoming very essential because you cannot have one segment of your employees who are isolated and feeling not included with the mainstream. So that care for each and every team member is very, very important. And how well, as a leader, you know your team. There are leaders who don't know their team. So until and unless you know who they are, how do you know what they want? So these things are very, very essential for a leader, and you have to practice these things. You have to include everybody, and you have to give them that feeling that they are not being neglected or ignored.
Right, Colonel. Colonel, the last question I'll have is about this whole communication element, because while of course it is important to keep talking and all, but it is an ongoing work because many a time we see communication as a one-time exercise.
Yeah.
And so how do you handle that at GAR? And you have been doing this pioneering work around employee mental well-being. How do you
Yeah.
build that constant energy around it?
See, the first thing, let me tell you why we had to engage a wellness partner. Okay, come to that. Why we had to engage the wellness partner? Now, we always, when we are doing things from an organization perspective, I always feel that there are certain people who are experts in what they do. Okay, so have that. And always, when you're talking about anything, there is this thing about assurance. Assurance doesn't come from within. Sometimes assurance comes from outside. Okay. And that is the reason when we were having this pandemic, we did a lot of things, but we didn't have the assurance that we were doing the right thing. So we went for a lot of audits, external audits. We got our organization audited by third parties, by British Safety Council, by International Wellbeing Institute. All these kind of people who were the experts, they came and did that. Okay. So that again, I think is a very, very important element where how do you give assurance that you are doing the right thing? And that is where communication plays a very, very important role. And that communication that, that you are really serious about what you do is when you are engaging people who can give you inputs that you might not directly get. Now, for example, the session that we had with you initially, where you went through, you did that session with each and every employee, one-on-one sessions with our employees. Those inputs were there for us, and I could, as a leader, see as to see. Otherwise, how would I come to know what is the stress level of my team? Okay, I never knew. I mean, a person will never come and talk to you openly. But sometimes, as a leader, you have to be able to use whatever tools you have got or whatever sort of measures you have got to understand the pulse of the team. And that is where I feel that this professional engagement with Mana has made a lot of difference to us. Where, as leaders, my team members could understand the pulse of the team, how the team was feeling. Then, of course, we got those agnostic reports without, I mean, keeping the privacy of the people in mind. We got those reports where I came to know as a leader as to what was the stress level of my team, what are the different type of stresses that they were subject to. So, as a leader, I could, try to talk to them and help them navigate them out of those kind of situations that they were facing in life. Okay, so those are and that is where I feel that communication is the key, and you have to use both the formal channels of communication as well as informal channels. And in informal channels, other things you could possibly do is social events and get together. In the armed forces, we had this concept of Bada Khana.
Yes.
where where you have troops and everybody, you give them two tots of rum also, so that they start, their tongue is loose and they start talking. Now in a rigid formal organization, people are very scared to talk, so that is why you have to use those measures. And in the corporate sector also, always, people will never talk openly until unless they have the confidence that when they talk, it results in a positive, action, and it doesn't result in the messenger being shot down. So that
Yes.
kind of a culture is what I think we need to create. And I think that ultimately it depends on the leader, the sort of an environment that it creates, so that it's a positive environment. Everybody feels good. Everybody has to feel good about what they are doing, and they have to feel that they are also equally contributing. I always see that between the carrot and the stick, the carrot always gets you better results than the stick.
That is a great way of signing off on that, actually, Colonel Ramesh. And yes, indeed. I mean, you can use the stick to probably tie the carrot, but please use the carrot more often, actually.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think
But
we
that's
all need
great.
to do that. We all need to do that.
Yes, yes. Some really, really very important, insightful advice there, Colonel Ramesh. As always, it's always been a wonderful experience talking to you and interacting on the subject of employee mental well-being. And particularly today, we could really touch upon the very important key role of the leader in an organization and the various facets of their role there, actually, and how they really can, um, uh, you know, um, impact the mindset of employees around mental well-being. So that brings us to the end of this conversation. Wonderful discussion with you, Colonel Ramesh. Thank you so much for joining us on this session.
Thank you,
Um,
Manoj, and thank you to your entire team. You see, positivity is always, it starts with a smile, and you've got such a wonderful team. When I talk to any member of your team, I feel that positivity that is there, and and that is what creates that good feeling, and that good feeling is something that we need to keep for everybody, in the organization. As a leader, you should smile more often.
yes.
I think.
Thank you. Thank you
Okay,
so much, Colonel.
thank you so
And
much.
speak soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.